Hello and welcome back to the classes and objects framework part 3, and it's the classes and objects tutorial part 4 I believe. Let's have a look quickly. There's part 1, I forget, part 2, part 3, yes, part 4, there we go, got it right. Okay, well, I'm really happy if you've watched the other 3 videos. You're like 3.5 hours into some videos, and I really hope you're starting to gain some knowledge now about how you should be at programming PHP. Now, just to reiterate over this, if you've been using lots of methods and lots of if statements and this, that and the other all the time and having a long piece of script, well, that's okay. If the script works, then it works, right? But the whole ethics behind this is splitting it down into lots of different parts, which is then reusable and also logical and can be edited at each one time. Now, what I want to basically just give a kind of quick example of something. Now, if you have a company and the company naturally has its finance department, its accounts department, marketing department and sales department, alright? And then the boss, the managing director, basically wants to have a report provided from the accounts department. Now, the accounts, potentially what the managing director doesn't want to do is have to go to the sales department, say how much money have you spent and received, marketing and gain and so on, and to the other departments. They just want to go to the accounts department and say, give me the report. That's the only thing that the managing director is going to say, give me the report please of our accounts. Now, the managing director doesn't care how the accounts department did it, they just want to know that they did it. Now, on that note as well, the accounts department needs to work by itself. Now, the marketing department and the sales department and all the other departments, they potentially need to work by themselves as well. Now, they will just register everything with one department all the time. Now, when the accounts department needs to extract the data, they work self-sufficient on their own. Okay, and this is how you want to have your code. So at any one point you need to adapt your code. All of the other code, it's not relying upon this one script. Okay, you can make the changes to it. You don't need to go throughout your whole code to edit it. Alright, so if you've got one method and one class that's being used in your code somewhere else by chance, then you need to make sure that your script that you've changed adapts to any old methods or old ways that have been used already. Now, anyway, so this is basically the concept of it, is making scripts that is self-sufficient and doesn't rely upon anything else. It can extend any other classes, but it never ever relies upon any other code to do its job, right? That's where the MVC comes into it, the model view controller. This then uses its own self-sufficient code, but it encapsulates it all together in order to actually make an application work. The classes and the library and the framework behind it do each of their own tasks, but the MVC logically places it all together to then actually output the data. So, on that note, I think this one's going to be a bit of a long one, so if you're going to watch it, pause it now, get yourself a drink, whatever, some cigarettes, some food, and let's crack on, shall we? So we're actually going to do a little bit of the front end visual part of it at the moment. We're kind of going to put the MVC element of it to sleep for this tutorial, and we're just going to make the main view, the output of what it's going to look like. There's going to be, I'm not really going to do any HTML in this because I don't really want to, and I'm making the assumption if you're learning PHP you know HTML already. Okay, one thing we are going to do though, if you haven't touched upon any HTML5 yet, we're just going to basically use the basic elements of HTML5 just as a kind of highlight to what you could be using as well. So without further ado, as I keep saying, let's crack on. So what we're going to do here is, under our source folder, we're actually just going to make some views first of all. Alright, and a nice simple one. We're just going to make a PHP file, and we're going to call this user profile. Okay, nothing spectacular, and we're just going to dump all this junk there, and we're actually just going to get rid of it. Alright, because we're just going to chuck some HTML in the page. Now for the time being, we're literally just going to make the simplest of HTML. Actually, I'll just pause the video and we'll do it properly, shall we? Okay, that didn't really take anything at all. So let's, now that we've just got a simple HTML page there, using HTML5 as well, just by defining the doc type of just HTML. Okay, so all I'm going to do basically here is make a simple two-column, we're not going to use tables, but two-column table, let's call it. On the left hand side is going to list out the users, and then on the right hand side is going to be the main element, which is going to be the form, which is then going to display all of the data, which will then have a save and like an update option there to update any information. So I'm just going to go ahead and going to make this table itself just using nice square box corners. Okay, then we'll just add some HTML5 to it using CSS after that. Alright, so see you in a split second. Okay, so here we go, there's our form done, and if we just come back over to our index, I've just basically got rid of the stuff that we did previously. We're just going to remove this here, and then change this because we don't need that anymore. And basically what I've done here is just inside I've made a user profile .css file, and also a views folder with a user profile .php, which is the actual view that we're going to have here. I've included I've made a reference to the actual CSS file, and simply just made a nice little just form and so on, ready for use later. Okay, so let's just come back over to here, and this is basically what it looks like. Let's just get rid of this hi, because I can't remember for the life of me where that was. Was that in the index? Was it the framework? It's there, so let's get rid of that. It's nasty, so it should be now gone. There we go. Okay. So now what we've got to do is we can basically go through our file, which we've got here under the user profile, because under our index.php we've already got our user here. Alright, now within the users we can use this information. Alright, so if we've declared the user itself, alright, now we come into our user profile, and potentially speaking we could just come here and say PHP and then echo model get first name, and this should, okay, because we haven't actually defined, so I removed it, model get user, and that's 1. So let's come back to this. Okay. That's more than likely because it's don't want to do that. Gonna have a check at that. Yeah, okay, silly me. So we actually have to define the user first of all, and we're going to take a reference to this as well. So let's just come over here and cut this back again, and then that's obviously user. Okay, come back to here, and we've got that undefined variable user. Just because I never saved that. Come back here again. And what was the name in the database? It was just name, I believe. Yeah, that's why. It's just name with a capital N, obviously. And there we go. We got the name there. So that was nice and easy. Okay, apart from the messing around that we had. Okay, so now we've just got to copy this and stick this in here. Stick this in here. Stick this in here. Stick this in here, and so on. And now country at this point is obviously going to say just 1, or the number that's in the database, and then come to email here, come to surname. There we've now filled out, and we've got everything that we need, you see. So basically, even if we don't declare the user itself, okay, so potentially if we'd have to actually validate with inside get user, if it is nothing, then it still returns a user itself, okay, because if we actually want to then remove user, we're going to get a whole bunch of error messages on here like this, basically saying because user is undefined. Now if we define user still, okay, it's just that, okay, so it's just basically as an empty string, come again, it's still going to cause an error, okay, because obviously we're trying to access a non-object, because it should be a user info object. So what we need to do is come to our user information itself, or user model, I believe it was, and we've got get users. So basically, as we're going through, we're making a new user. Alright, now if it is equal to 1, that's what we're saying. Otherwise, now with inside of our user info, we've got to pass in the actual object itself. So we need to come to user info, because we need to edit this very, very slightly, okay, because the user data. Now if it is an object, then fine. But really what we want to do is just going to put false here. Alright, so if it is an object, then do this. Else, all we're going to do is we're going to say return this. Okay, because what we still want to actually, we just don't need to, yeah, we're just going to say return this. Alright, nice and simple. Because then we can just instantiate the user info itself, and then send back an empty class, basically. So it's still going to work. So we're going to come back to our index. So what we can do is just chuck this down here, chuck this down here as well, so we don't have to mess around so much. We'll move our logic a little bit, and so on. And then we come here. We've got all of our user information now. Here. Okay, so let's now try this once again. That's obviously nothing, but what we do is we go back to our user model, wherever that may be. Where did it go? Did I close it down? No, it's there. Let's chuck that down there. Oh, I didn't do it. Let's chuck that down there, and let's chuck you there. Okay, so user model. Now if it's equal to 1, then do this. Else, we got array key exists. Right, so we're checking that. If we're no, else user equals that. So basically, if we're not defining the ID, okay, which we want it also equal to false. So now what we want to do is just push this over twice, and we're just going to say if ID first of all, and if it is, then all well and good. We can continue on from here, and now we're going to come down and we're going to extend it very slightly, else we're going to return a new user info. Alright, just so we know that we're getting an object all the time, and return from get user. Okay, so this is a lot better now, and we can come back over to our user model, or we've got the user model, then our index here, and now we can actually uncomment this, take this out, remove the 1 from there, come to here. Now you can see we've got a perfectly fine form once again. So we've got the same information. That we'll put 1 back in here, so now we're actually extracting the data from the database, and we actually get the information from the database this time. Okay, so potentially that means we can have an empty form and we can have a full form, all using the same logic. Now if you've ever done this before, where basically you've got to test if this person is set, if that's set, and so on, if there's a value, if not, well, we've made it nice and simple with our logic, and we've kept our view, okay, down to minimal code, or we just want to keep it as maximum as possible, just to HTML with a little bit of logic as well. Alright, now what we also could do is basically from here, as you can see, I've got here error message, error. Now what we want to start doing after that would then be checking any logic about whether it has been set or not been set, and so on, using sessions, which we're going to make like kind of a form saver later on, to save the things, because when they actually press submit, we want to remember this form itself, okay, and save it within inside of our sessions, so we can use it at a later date all the time. Because what we don't want to do, well, anyway, we'll talk about it later on. Okay, this will become another part of the framework itself, to be a form saver. Now potentially that is already saved because it's in the request super global, but we're gonna use that even further, and then have some functionality in that as well. All right. Okay, so now we've got our profile itself, which is all good. Got a profile itself. Now what we want to do is we want to list out down here person 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. We want to list out all the users. So let's come back over to our code and to our user profile that we've got here. Now on the left hand side, now you can see we've got all of this. Now we've already got some logic for this already, okay, which is get users. So if we come over to our user model once again, and we see get users, we're entering in the user info into that. Alright, as we go through, we're saying select everything from users, order by ID, checking how many number of rows there are, and so on, and we're returning self users. Now realistically speaking, if we're going to go to our user profile and we're going to iterate through an array, we'd then need to first check if it's an array. So it would be far better if we actually just made it an array on get users. Now is that a good idea? Because we always, well, it's a good idea we get users. We always want it to be an array, but we want it to be an empty array, so at least we don't ever get any errors on that. But I would much prefer to have like kind of a checker, a validator, are there active users, are there users, and then move on to go through the array nice and easily. Okay, because I'd rather the get users return false than it actually return an empty array. That's just my own personal preference though. So what have we got at the moment? If it's going to get more than 0, it's going to return this array, which we've got already. Else it's going to return false. Okay, fine. So we could actually just use get users, because it's going to return false otherwise. So let's come back over to our user profile. Now all we've got to do here is say if model gets users, and we're just going to use the shorthand here, and we're just going to say end if, like that. Then it's going to continue on like here, so we can actually test this, see if it works, and it all works fine. So we are getting users. Now what we can do from here is get users to check the logic again of what we've got. That actually returns the array itself, which means we don't have to pass it to any we don't have to pass it to any other variable. We can just use it straight from there. So let's now make a for each loop. Okay, so for each model users. Now here's to go back. Let's just finish this off quickly as key and user. Actually, let's just do this as value, and then come down to here and finish this off. Then I can explain what I wanted to explain. And for each. Okay, let's budge this over so it's nice and tidy, and let's just knock that line out itself and knock this line out itself, and then let's just budge these over because we're going to get rid of all these in a second anyway. So we'll just get rid of these, do a bit of tidying up. There we go, good. Right, where was I? So model get users, that should be. Yes, where was I? We were... No, completely forgot what I was going to say. Alright, anyway, let's do this and then hopefully it will come to me what I was going to say. So value is now our actual user information. So what we can do is we can come in here and we can say PHP echo value get, and then just say name. Okay, and let's just, we've just iterated through this. Now come here, we can see that now we've got David and James, so we've got the actual users on there. Okay, the next thing that we want to do from here is when we click on this, we want it to send the user ID through the URL, so then this can read which one we've got to extract from the data. Okay, that was what I was going to say. I just remembered it now. Now, get users. We've called this twice here. All right. Now, when we go to our model, the first time it's done get users, it's done set query. Okay, and it's checked to see whether it's done a database call. All right. Now, as it's gone through each one, it's gone. Okay, fine. It's a num rows, this, that, and the other for each, and it's then put them inside of the users. Now, it would be more logical at this time to basically kind of rather than doing two calls of get users. So what we want to do, I believe, is actually have another way of saying, well, is users set, alright? Because if we're going to save anything, we're going to have a page refresh, which means we're going to initially call this once again. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to have to do two calls to the database to get this, to retrieve the same information to save this into the static users which we've got here. I just want to call it once, okay, and then use this users from this time on. Now I'm trying to think of any circumstance where users wouldn't be up to date without us doing a check in the database, but I can't think of anything for now. So what we're going to check instead is we're going to say if is not an array, and we'll say self users, then we're going to continue with this. Alright, and chuck that in there. tidy this up very, very slightly. Okay, so if it's not an array, self-users, then continue on and do what you want here. Alright? So now, otherwise, we're going to say else if, because obviously self-users, so if it's not an array, yeah, okay, no, that's fine. If it's not an array, then it's going to be null, or it's going to be, or, yeah, that's it, it's fine. So we want to say return self-users, okay? Now that means that we're only ever going to call it once, alright? So now with this user model, or user profile, sorry, we're calling it the first time, we're actually populating the the static user property. Okay, now the second time, all we're doing is we're actually using the static property itself. We're not doing any database calls. So just to confirm that everything's working fine still, and we've got David James. Okay, so that means we actually lost one. So my idea there didn't actually work. So let's go back to user model and let's have a look. So if it's not set, so the first time it then went through so get users. Why is that not going to work then? For each one there. It's not obviously added that in, is it? Well, it must have done because we was returning it here. That means that okay, I'm going to have another look. Okay, so I've just come to work out we're actually going to need to do this for now. Maybe we can find another workaround for this later. But it's basically because the get user is going to populate the users itself and make it an array. I'll have a think about it, and there's for sure another way we can get around this without doing two database calls. But for the time being, everything will work fine because this get user here populated the static user property and with one of them, which meant that it was a user. Therefore, the static user property was already an array, which meant it skipped through the database call, which actually did exactly what we wanted, but not really what we want. So let's come back and test it once again, and I've just printed out a few things there which we don't need anymore. So user profile, let's get rid of this. Should now displays both people. Okay, so let's actually come here now and let's come and say ID, and this is not what I want to do. I don't really want to give the ID structure away to everyone, because otherwise it's going to give the ID of the person away all the time, and I think that's what we're going to use the PUID for. So as you can see now, we've got, as we roll over each one, we've got the ID of each person. Now as we go through, we're actually going to change that to the PUID, so we're using a hash to check them rather than an ID itself. Okay. Right, so now what we've got to do is we need to use the get method with inside the URL to actually test which person we're going to display. Alright, so as we click on this, it's then going to go over and it's going to say ID equals 1, ID is equal to 2. Now, so let's just stick for the time being with the ID, and let's come to here. So as we click on it, our index that we've got at the moment is going to get the user, okay, which is fine. Now really what we want to do is we want to take this one out and then come to our user model with get users, and we want to test whether if ID is not set, okay, then we're going to come here and we're going to say return user info instead. So well, what about if we test also if the get ID is available? Alright, so up here let's say ID is equal to Okay, if is set, and let's put get ID, then it's equal to get ID, else it's equal to ID. So if we have basically said, yeah, ID is there, then it's gonna go through and it's going to use the ID instead. Anyway, you'll see in a second. Alright, so as we come through here, we've got ID is equal to 2 and then ID is equal to 1. Now at the moment, because basically we're putting the people in the array as we go through, which is something that we actually don't want once again. But it's because it's indexed it. Right, what we need to do now then is basically sort these as the ID. Now, just for a spot of interest for you, let's go over to php.net and let's go just array, and what we can find down here is sort. Okay, and come to sort. Okay, this function's elements will be arranged by the lowest to the highest when the function is complete. Alright, so if we come down and look at the examples, you see here, as it comes out, it will sort them, by the actual value itself. Alright, and we can see here, look, the function assigns new keys to the elements. Okay, what I've decided though is that what we're going to do is, rather than on get users, we're not going to return the users here. Okay, we're actually going to return the users up here. So we're going to place it into the users array here as well. Alright, now users, and we're going to use the user ID as well. Okay, and then we're going to place self users, whoops, and user ID, we're going to place it into this. Okay, and then we're actually going to return users itself, this array up here instead. Okay, which basically means that we're getting exactly what we want here, order by ID ascending. So all the time when we call this, we're getting exactly what we want, but we're storing all of the people inside of the static property itself ready for later use. So now if we come back over to here, this now displays nothing, which is not what I wanted at all. Okay, simple mistake is obviously because it checked the first time to get users, it's stored already with inside the users here, and which means it skipped over this every single time. Therefore we're just going to place this afterwards, so we know that by the time it has looped round, well, they are in self users here, and we're just going to populate it here now. Okay, so every single time we know that users is actually going to return as an array and not come down here and return false. Okay, so we come here, as you can see, it all works fine. Now we click on David here and we click on James, and it populates our user profile, nice and easy. Okay, now I want to just go back over this once again just to show you where's the benefit in all this code that we've just written. Alright, now this is our view which we've made, alright, and it has absolute minimal amount of code which we need to have, and it's very, very clean indeed. And as you can see that we can come here and we can put the wrong ID in as well. Okay, and it's going to come up with an error message down here. So this is something that we need to fix on line 37. It's because the ID is not it's not finding, which was on user profile called, okay, it's because it returns something inside the user, inside get user, okay, ID, and it's checked down here. So it's got the ID itself is set, and if it's not exist, then return new user. But okay, not if the array key doesn't exist, then select everything from there if num rows is equal to this. Okay, so it's now got down to here, alright, which means that it's not done anything. It's then skipped over to here and it's returned false, right, which is not good, because obviously we need to know that we populate it with a user info, here. So all we have to do is come here, okay, and return new user info and just leave it blank, alright, because we know that there's nothing actually there. So let's come back, and as you can see we get a blank form, which is exactly what we want. We want to write as minimal code as possible so our form can be empty, new, or also then a current user, and if someone then starts typing in stuff into the URL, they're not going to display any error messages saying this user has not been found. Okay, so we come here, we've got this one and we've got this one, nice and simple. Okay, so now this bit has done. Now let's add a little bit of like pizzazz to it, shall we? Because I'm not a big fan of having to refresh the page all the time. Well, what about if we kind of implemented a little bit of Ajax to it, which would be a lot nicer. Well, why don't we first of all we click the save button, we actually write something that can update the user information, which would be far easier as well. So let's just come back over to here, and now let's continue on with writing another class in order to save the data. Okay, so in order to move on from here, we need to continue on with our MVC. Okay, now in order to be able to work out, well, do we need to save any data first before we actually continue displaying anything? Alright, because they've clicked the save button. Let's just jump over back to here. They've clicked the save button, the page refreshes, the data that's inside the form already needs to be sent. This then needs to be collected. We need to work out, well, wait a minute, a button's been pressed. What is it that you want us to do with it? Do you want to delete something? Do you want to save it? Do you want to update it? Are we making a new one? So we need something to really control the actions, the task that we need to do. So something to control the task of what we want to do. Well, really, now what we need is the C part of the MVC. Okay, now inside of our class we've got the MVC. Now, as we've been speaking, this is a framework, so we want to be able to have this as part of our framework for the core functionality of the controller itself. So what we're going to come and do is actually make our MVC itself, make our MVC, if I can spell this correctly, and place a new folder in here. Okay, so now with inside of this we're going to make a class in here, and we're going to call this controller, and then just click finish, and that's going to make controller. We're going to get rid of a couple of these that we don't need for now. MySQL we don't need, defines we don't need, users model, yeah, that will do for now. Okay, so with inside of our controller, I'll explain as we go through what this is actually going to do. So the controller, as always, wants to extend our logic, alright, because the logic provides us with functionality which we want to use all the time, and the logic provides us with the database as well. So let's just come to this here, copy that for the sake of ease, paste it in here and put that there. Good. So now we have the controller. So now let's public function, and let's get the constructor itself. So now we've got the constructor. Okay, now within inside of the controller, what we want to have is a couple of things, which is, first of all, we're going to make a public function called display. Okay, this potentially is going to be the actual view that's going to output the display itself. Now, what we also want to have in here is something called get model. Okay, this get model is then going to preload any business logic of saving anything to the database prior to the display being executed. Alright, now on that note, by saying executed, we want to then have execute. Alright, so that's actually going to execute anything that we want to do. Now, so potentially when it's called, it's going to get the model. It's going to then work out, is there anything that I need to do in the model side to save any data and so on, or collect any data. Now once that's done, it then needs to decide, well, what am I actually going to display? Which view do I want to display and so on. Once it's then worked out what display we're going to use, we then want to then execute anything to put anything together and so on. And finally, what we want to do is have a public function, and we're going to call this render. Okay, render is basically going to output everything that we need. Alright, so this is our base function at the moment. Now, get model. Now for the time being, what we're going to do is we're just going to make up here, just for the sake of it, no, actually we'll hard code it into this for the time being. The model that we're going to be using is the users. Alright, now what we need to have is potentially, let's think about this. Right, we're going to hard code this for the time being. So our users here, we want to come to find out actually where that is, because I've completely forgotten. Is within inside of our classes, and the users itself here is what we need. Okay, but we had the users model, which was within inside the MVC. Okay, this MVC, which is within inside the classes one, potentially this needs to be moved inside of here. Okay, because it's within inside the users itself. Alright, so we might need to do a bit of rejigging with this. On the index page, user model is under MVC. Well, that's actually not correct anymore, because it's now under users. So under the defines, did we define something? Lib classes. So let's define a classes root as well. Okay, so let's just come here, classes, and then root dot classes, and then just finish it off with this. Nice and easy there. Okay, now if we put this before here, we can use this classes in here instead, and remove this because there's no requirement for that like that. Put a dot there. Now we've got a classes define that we can use. So let's come to our user info, because that's user model. First of all, we need to come to, and we can just come here and remove this, and then just say classes as well. Let's save that. Now let's come to our user info. We got that. Where is that? User profile. We didn't use that there. User info. Here it is. Okay, so that's user info. That hasn't used the user as such there. User model. We're going to change that to classes, and then user model, which we then need to actually come here and say users, because that's where the file was, and place that in there. So let's come back and check again. User model is under users, and we spelt that. We didn't spell it correctly. User info, where are you again? There you are. Where is it? Model. Users, that's correct. There. Users, framework, yep, logic, it's all good. User model, we got that. User info, we got that, fine. User profile, good, we're all happy, and that's where it was users there. Okay, so fine, let's just have a double check, see whether we've got any errors, because it's all, yep, still working. So come to there, that's all working fine. Okay, so back to the controller itself. So the controller is basically going to require the users itself. Alright, so we'll just come in here and we're going to say classes, and then users, and then directory separator, and then users model.php. Okay, so we now know that the get model from the controller is going to load the user's model. Now this is going to change a hell of a lot at the moment, but we have to do this in order to basically make our front end MVC. Okay, so we're going to say controller equals new controller first of all. Come here, controller not found. Yep, that's fine. Well, all we want in here is to say MVC, and that is with inside the MVC, which was with inside the lib MVC, the controller. So actually that's in then lib root, and with inside, sorry I forgot again, MVC, directory separator here, and then that is then controller.php. Okay, now to be honest with you, it would be far easier if we just take this out and we're going to put it in our framework instead, because it's got a lot of more use in the framework by already requiring the controller itself. So now we can come back and test this once again, see if we can get rid of this error message. User model on, okay, so the class not found, which is fine. User model, okay, that's just simply because we haven't obviously required this one as yet, but with inside of the controller itself, obviously we're now bringing this user model into effect. The user model is requiring the user, and then that's right. What did that user model not found on there? So let's have a check this once again. So framework is where we're requiring the MVC controller, okay, which is fine. That's where we want to go. All right. So with inside of our constructor here, potentially we need to say this get model, and that will then require the user's model file that we need. Okay, good, we've got some more errors, it's fine. Fail to open stream, no such directory, lib MVC controller, classes, okay. So with inside of the controller once again, it's not under classes, you lunatic. Okay, I'll put in users model. That's why that's the problem there. So now we've got no errors, which is cool. Okay, that's still working fine. So it means now we've adapted it very slightly, and we've just got the controller in place instead now. Alright, now with the controller we need to basically know now that we're going to load our view itself as well. Okay, so to come to the project itself, we've got with inside of our users, we've got the user info, the model, and the users itself. Okay, and down here we've got the view. Now what we want to basically have is some way within inside of the URL to say which view we're going to use. Now, for the time being, like I said before, we're basically just going to hard code things for the time being, and then we're going to come back and we're going to do this part later because it takes a little bit more coding to get this bit done. Right, so that's just views and user profile itself. So let's just get rid of this, and we'll put in root because we want to make sure we get the relative path to it all the time, and views, and then user profile.php, scrap this. Okay, now we can say this display, so we're requiring that as well. Alright, and we come back to here, see whether we get any errors on that. Undefined, yeah, okay, fine. So that's now requiring the display. And let's just get rid of this and see what errors we're getting now on here. I just want to read what this says. That says undefined variable model. I'll just show you how I'm reading it. Undefined variable model on the views user profile line 16. Okay, this is because obviously it's been done with inside of the controller here. Alright, now because we've called display with inside of that, the file which is the model variable, which we've been defined with inside of here, and also we defined here, is where it's causing the problem. So that was once again the undefined variable model with inside the views user profile on line 16. So let's line 16. Okay, it's this variable here which is not reading. Okay, so but with inside of the controller we've required this one file. So this file here is now with inside of the controller itself, which would mean we can access all of the class because this is now inside of it. Alright, so let's, just for testing purposes, let's actually add something in to test whether we can access it with inside of the file. Okay, so what we've basically got to do is have our model itself, because we've loaded our model here, so we now know the name of the model. If we stick to a generic naming convention for the models, so we come to our user model itself, we know that the name is actually user and it's based upon the class of model, so the naming convention goes together. So all we ever need to know with inside of our controller itself is if we actually change the name of user model just to model, okay, which is then the users folder, once again as well, we potentially need to come over to the users model, wherever it is, because I've lost it again, and we're actually going to change the name of it to users model, okay, to keep the naming convention correct. And actually we've got user profile, user, actually we're going to keep it as user, and then we're going to come back to here and we're going to change the folder name itself, which is probably going to mess things up totally. And let's see whether this does it all for us. Okay, it's changed all the names there, which is cool. Actually no, it didn't do anything there. Okay, user model is there. Let's see where we've actually used this information. Not on there. Let's just take it out from there. So that one's now correct. Not in this one, not in this one, not in that one. In this one we'll change that, and defines is not in there. Okay, good. So now they're all updated, alright? Okay, just to go over this once again because it can get confusing. The controller itself is going to be the first thing that fires, and it's going to control, is instantiate, require, include, execute and render everything to do with the web page itself. Alright, so we're only potentially ever going to call the controller, and it's going to do lots of automated calls to other classes and instantiate the other classes, which within inside of the instantiation of the class, that's going to fire a few other automatic things as well based upon what's in the URL. Okay, so it's all going to be automated until it then gets down to the view itself, which is then going to output all of the information. So within inside of our controller constructor, we're saying get the model please, okay, get the business logic. Now once we're in there, what we need to do with inside of this is now say public and then we say model, okay, equals null. So as we include the model here, we know the name of the folder and we know that it's the model, okay, because we're using a naming convention of just model itself. Now let's make sure that we change the name of this as well. So we change this to model.php so that the convention, name convention here is also correct. Let's just go and have a double check that we're using the correct file all the time. Framework, yes there. Users, yes there. And 1 second, so we need to change that as well, which would be then user info extends logic, and users for the time being actually doesn't do anything, but that can stay how it is, it's fine. Okay, so user, we now required the user's model itself, which is here. So what we have to do is we have to instantiate it. So this model, okay, equals new, and didn't want that there. And because we're going to do this dynamically, class name here equals user, and I know this looks a bit weird, but we're actually just going to do it like this. Alright, so class name equals this, and then we're just going to fire it. So we're actually going to add this model, okay, to up here on instantiation. Now what does this mean from here? Alright, it means that within inside of our file down here, the model is available. Alright, now let's go to the user profile. Now potentially this .get users, well, I'd rather not provide access to the model from here, okay, because I want it to be done with inside of the view itself, like a kind of code behind. So what we need to do is actually make with inside of the controller, we need to make this protected. Okay, now protected means that it can only be accessed with inside of the class itself, and it can't be used in an object instance. Alright, so it can be used in any inherited classes, extended classes, and it can be used with inside of the class, but it cannot be used at the object level, which means that the object has been instantiated. Okay, so by saying this model means now, because it's protected, it cannot be used with inside of the user profile itself by us saying now this model. So we really don't want to have this get users being called at this one point here. We want to have it called in the view itself. Okay, so let's just double check to make sure that everything's working fine and dandy, shall we? So what we're going to do is we're just going to change this back for the time being, just to check that everything's working. Alright, and then we're going to change it back to protected. So let's go to user profile and let's change this now to this model, okay, and we'll just copy this as well and change it here to this model here, okay, and then we'll see how many hundreds of error messages we get. Okay, class users model not found on 23. Well, that's fine because we know that we changed it. On 23 it was user model, which we changed it to. Okay, it's fine. We've got some error messages. We knew that we was going to get some. So class objects user profile line 30 undefined variable user. So let's come to here and okay, it said user just then, which was inside of then the get you 36. Why does that say user? Where did we put the user then? Oh, of course, it was on. It was within here. This is now not relevant to it. Okay, so this. Okay, back to user profile. Now we just want to have it as this. Okay, because as long as the controller itself. The trouble is though, is that the the information from the model, which we was using as the user in here, so let's go back to index.php, this was then providing access from the get user to user here. Okay, now like I said, is that the controller is retrieving this information to this model, and then we've then got the functionality of the get users with inside of the user profile, okay, which is up here, which is now doing this work here, which is kind of fine. But now we need to know that we've got the get name. We need to know that the name property is of part of the controller itself. So what we need to do is try to find some clever way with inside of the user profile to allow the model to populate the controller with these properties. Okay, so what we could just do is go with inside of the model and think about this. Well, we need to have now a view potentially, and the view will then give this data to the actual template, the template which we're going to use, and let's just call this user profile as the actual template itself. Okay, because we don't want to allow the template, being the view, access to the model. We only want to allow the view class to access the model. Alright, because remember, we're trying to split all of the different items up. Now what I'm going to do, because this is now 1 hour, I'm going to put this one to bed first of all, and we're going to leave it as this. Please go away and have a think about what I've spoken about. Have a bit of research about MVC, Model View Controller. Okay, have a check upon how the object inheritance works, how you can extend classes. Now the other videos which I've done already highlight it, and then we can start moving on to work out. If you've managed to get through 1 hour and 3 minutes on this one video now, and kind of understood it and ready to move on to the next tutorial, then this video potentially was made perfectly for you. Okay, if you're not quite there yet, don't quite understand it, don't worry about it, then go back to the beginning and start again. Alright, I have read the same book and books many times and banged my head against the wall many times, not quite understanding something, and it took me a while, if not a long time, to be able to understand exactly how it works and the logic behind it. The difficult task which I have right here, right now, is to explain this to you, how everything is working, and also program it as well. And I'm making this framework and this website, or this user information, on the fly. Okay, so I'm trying to show you how I think about this whilst programming it, and believe it or not, you will always make errors. Every single programmer will always make an error, do some coding, then decide, oh, this code doesn't work anymore, how can I make it better? That's the whole point of programming. Alright? Okay, so let's just save all this up, ready for next time. We've got a couple of errors. Well, prior to the next tutorial, I am going to dig deep into the errors and make sure we can just explain this correctly in the first time. But these aren't errors, alright? All they are is it's informing us where we need to alter the code so it works properly. Now, we've done a lot of modifications to the code and we are now building the MVC, the model view controller. So we need to actually test a few pieces of code and see where it's working. At one point it's going to hit an error because we haven't yet written that code. Alright, so this error is just basically saying, hey, you haven't written this code yet, please go ahead and write it. Okay, so I wish you all a nice evening, a nice day. It's been very nice spending the last hour with you. That's it for me for now. My name's David Thorne from Thorne Web Design, if you didn't know already. Come and see me on Facebook, send me a message, write me some details, how you thought this went, but just send me a private message instead. Alright, I'd rather you send me a private message. Tell me if there's anything you didn't understand. Please tell me the minute in the video at which point you didn't understand it, and I'm more than happy to explain it to you. Alright, and if not, then I'm going to have to make another video maybe explaining a few things about this video. Okay, this isn't supposed to be a quick and easy set of tutorials. Alright, they're supposed to be long, they're supposed to be complicated, because I'm trying to teach you guys actually that programming can be complicated but needs to be done in a logical fashion and working things out. Once you can start working these things out, it gets so much more easier. And the work that we've done has been talking and reflecting on how things are being done, and it's only been an hour and 7 minutes. If I was working on this by myself, it would probably along the lines of maybe 20 to 40 minutes maximum, okay, because there's obviously no chit chat in between, and also there'd be a whole bunch of errors, okay, but I would just be doing it a lot quicker because I'm not talking about it. So go away, have a try of it, keep going on, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Okay, keep your head up, keep positive, and we're going to get there. Alright, there's maybe another 7-8 hours worth of videos left on this, so hopefully by the end of it you're really happy with doing some PHP programming. Alright, right, that's me. Have a nice evening. Bye bye.